Governments and banks feel threatened by Bitcoin because they can no longer control how we spend our money. In this video, I want to go through why Bitcoin being neutral money is so important and why you shouldn't ignore this asset. Bitcoin is competing with dollars, real estate, stocks, bonds, all the assets that we have in the world today as a way to store value. There are so many people who use real estate to store value for the future because the purchase of real estate is incentivized using dollars by governments. The people who buy real estate can use real estate depreciation to offset their income and decrease the taxes that they have to pay. But these tax benefits aren't free. They come at the expense of anyone who saves in the currency that the government issues. Governments can spend recklessly if they want to because every currency can be created at will. What governments do is they try to steer the world into a certain direction by using tax benefits and by creating more money and by offering certain incentives. So they can get you to buy more houses than you need because they'll offer you a benefit of not having to pay taxes and being able to accumulate more wealth over time. This directly contributes to the wealth gap that we see today. As more people buy real estate as an investment because they know that the dollar will be continuing to lose value forever, the people who want to buy houses to live in are at a disadvantage. They're competing with investors. And we're seeing this get worse over time. More and more institutions are buying single-family homes, and they're using these houses as a business. They're using them to generate cash flows. Today, governments and banks can work together to create more money and add it to the economy. What Bitcoin does is it separates money from state. Governments borrow as much money as they want to pay for certain agendas. They can give people tax benefits for doing things that they want them to do. Bitcoin is neutral money that directly competes with dollars. What I mean by this is that nobody can stop you from using your Bitcoin how you want to. There's no central authority that can stop people from being able to spend Bitcoin that's in their wallet. The Bitcoin network is controlled by a network of thousands of computers that are all around the world. On the other hand, the current financial system is controlled by a single computer that's in the US. The Federal Reserve has so much power over us, and most people don't even realize it. The Federal Reserve can print money out of thin air. We have to work for this money, while there's a group of people in the US that can just print it. They can create it out of thin air. They can then use this money to let the US government spend recklessly. Right now, the state and money are one entity. Governments own and control all of the money that we use today. We use dollars, governments control them. We use yuan, governments control them. Whoever issues the money gets to take advantage of everyone else. So in this case, we can see that the US government has certain agendas that it wants to follow, certain things that it wants to complete. It can just borrow money and create it out of thin air and spend that money into the economy. On the other hand, we have to work 60 to 80 hours a week to earn the same money. The people who save in dollars are always going to be at a financial disadvantage. The financially literate buy stocks and real estate because they know for a fact that creating more companies or building more houses is much more difficult than issuing more dollars. The people who are saving in dollars are getting poorer over time, while the people who save in real estate are getting richer. The income that people are earning from their jobs is decreasing in purchasing power every single year because of inflation. Going on a Bitcoin standard is the only way to decrease the wealth gap that we experience today. Governments can borrow as much money as they want to, and they can spend it into the economy. We use this money that they borrow and create more of as a savings vehicle. On a Bitcoin standard, money can't be created out of thin air because if you're paying someone in Bitcoin, they're going to want actual Bitcoin. They're not going to want some IOU. They're not going to want some fake version of Bitcoin because that's not what has value. And we can confirm whether or not Bitcoin is real by accepting it into our wallets. The Bitcoin network does all of this for us. The fact that dollars can be created at will has changed everything. People can take on mortgages to buy houses that they can't afford, and they can pay those houses off over 30 years. What this does is it brings demand from the future into the present, and it increases prices for everything. Instead of having to save money for a house, what people can do is they can buy that house today and they can make small payments over the next 30 years. This means they no longer have to save. They don't have to take money out of the economy and decrease demand for other goods. They can maintain a car that they can't afford or go on vacations every year when they can't really pay for them. The entire system is built on bringing future consumption into the present. And this is what Bitcoin solves. Bitcoin gets rid of this. It separates money from state. It's neutral money that nobody can control, nobody can stop. Nobody can inflate the supply to stop you from being able to save in Bitcoin. I've actually watched politicians in Canada say that the money in savings accounts shouldn't be there. It should be used to stimulate the economy. And that's exactly what they're doing. When governments borrow money and add it to the economy, all they're doing is they're taking that money from anyone who's saving for the future and they're spending it today. They're decreasing the value of any savings that you keep in your bank account by creating more money. Could you imagine a world where banks can't create money out of thin air anymore? I think things would get a lot cheaper. If you can't borrow money for a house over the next 30 years and then pay it back in small increments, it means that you can't bring your future desires, your future demands into the present. The majority of the economic growth we have today is borrowed from the future. For example, Canada's economy relies so heavily on real estate that if real estate stopped being an investment, the entire system would probably collapse. Banks are able to create money out of thin air, and anyone who can borrow that money is able to use it to buy real goods. They're using a form of money that's basically just an entry in a book that one group controls, and they're using this to buy actual goods in the real world. If a real estate investor can come up with a 20% down payment, they can automatically start competing with anyone who wants to buy a house to live in. When there's more competition, prices rise, demand goes up, supply decreases, fewer and fewer people are willing to sell their houses. Since Bitcoin is a neutral network, it takes money out of the hands of governments and financial institutions and gives it to the people who are actually productive. When governments can no longer create money out of thin air to give people tax benefits, they actually have to start producing something of value to get people to come into their country. The US government can go into as much debt as it wants to, and the Federal Reserve can print as many dollars as it wants to. And all this does is it incentivizes the purchase of real estate and stocks. The US dollar is supposed to be base layer money, but it doesn't work because you can't save in it. It can be created at will. The fact that Bitcoin is neutral money means that nobody can stop you from spending it how you want to. You can pay for all the things that you want without somebody coming out of nowhere and maybe freezing your accounts or taking your money away from you. If you save in Bitcoin, over time, your purchasing power is going to go up because nobody can create more, add it to the economy, and satisfy demand. The only way to satisfy your demand for Bitcoin is to produce something of value. You can then sell whatever you have to whoever has Bitcoin. On a Bitcoin standard, nobody can stop you from spending your money. Nobody can take your money away. Nobody can create money out of thin air and debase everything that you've saved. The fact that the US dollar can be created out of thin air to stimulate the economy is a joke on its own. You can't just create money and act like it helps people become more prosperous. That money on its own has no value. What does have value is the things that we consume, the things that we need. Even Bitcoin on its own has no value if there's nothing to spend it on. So when the US government creates money out of thin air to stimulate the economy, all they're doing is they're moving money from one pocket to the other. They're moving money from savers to anyone else. They're decreasing the value that savers have and the value that savers have accumulated over the last year, last decades, and they're giving it to everyone else. They're stealing the value of people who are productive and the people who have spent less than they earned, and they're giving it to everyone else. The entire financial system is, in a way, designed to incentivize more and more spending, more and more investing, more and more people consuming. If you don't spend or invest in this financial system, you're a loser because everything that you save is going to eventually be worthless. The US dollar is a melting ice cube. When the world no longer uses fiat currencies like dollars, pounds, euros, yen, I think we're going to see a massive change in the power structures that we have today. A lot of the clients that I deal with on a regular basis are renters, and if they had the choice, they would obviously buy a house because they don't want to be paying rent forever. They don't want the instability of having to move every few years. A lot of them would rather own a home over renting. But this isn't possible because the current financial system is designed to keep house prices going up and make homes unaffordable for anyone who wants to buy them to live in. I think what's going to change a lot of people's mind about Bitcoin is that the merchants that they are constantly buying things from are eventually going to want to own Bitcoin as well. What happens when a massive company like Amazon or Walmart start offering discounts to people for paying in Bitcoin? Because when you pay in Bitcoin, the merchant doesn't have to pay the transaction processing fees. Visa and MasterCard alone take 2 to 3% of every single transaction. What this means is that even though they're not producing anything, Visa and MasterCard get to take a cut out of every single transaction that's processed. On a Bitcoin standard, the merchant doesn't have to pay the fees. The purchaser of whatever goods that the merchant is selling is the one who has to pay the fees. What this means is that merchants can now cut this 2 to 3% fee that they're paying MasterCard and Visa out of their prices. What this does is it incentivizes people to look into Bitcoin because they can save a little bit of money by using it to pay for their goods and services. Once more people figure out what Bitcoin is, I think they're going to intentionally go to a Bitcoin standard, because why would you save in the dollar if you had a choice? You know for a fact that the dollars that you're saving are losing value over time. The people who are saving in dollars today are the ones who are financially illiterate, or they have no other choice. But now Bitcoin gives you a choice, meaning that you can now move away from the dollar. The entire world can do this. So just to compare, we have no clue how many dollars are going to exist in the next 20, 30, 40 years, but we do know exactly how much Bitcoin will be issued. The maximum supply of Bitcoin is 21 million, while every fiat currency can be created at will, and there's no limit to how much can be created. Bitcoin is neutral because there are computers around the world that are running the Bitcoin protocol and making sure that the people using Bitcoin aren't going against the rules of the network. There are thousands of computers doing this and confirming to make sure that the transactions that are happening on the network aren't being used to manipulate people who are using Bitcoin to save. Because Bitcoin is software, it provides the best property rights of any asset in the world. There are no feelings involved. If someone has the private keys to a certain wallet, they can spend the Bitcoin in that wallet. So the responsibility goes to the savers to protect their Bitcoin, to make sure that nobody can take their Bitcoin. In the current financial system, we've outsourced this responsibility to financial institutions and to governments. Because we've given the responsibility of keeping our money safe to governments and financial institutions, they're taking advantage of us. They can block our transactions and they can freeze our accounts. This is what makes Bitcoin so much better than the current financial system. And this is what scares governments and financial institutions. They no longer have power over us. On a Bitcoin standard, as long as you're able to pay the fees to process your transaction, you can use your money to spend it on whatever you want to. What this is going to do is, instead of people buying real estate and pumping up the prices of housing all over the world, they're going to instead have to invest if they want to make an income, if they want to earn passive income. Bitcoin is going to completely change everything because it's going to take away the need to invest in real estate, to save for the future, and to earn passive income. Bitcoin gives people a way to save, and they can now start investing in themselves, in their own businesses, and they can start adding value to society by creating something of value. Most people just see the financial benefits of owning Bitcoin, but I see it a little differently. I see it as a way for people to have freedom, to be able to quit the jobs that they hate because their savings are increasing in value over time. On a Bitcoin standard, you don't have to have a finance degree to save for the future because you don't have to buy assets anymore. You just save in Bitcoin. Again, this is only possible because Bitcoin is neutral money. On a US dollar standard, you wouldn't be able to save in dollars because you have no idea how many dollars will exist in the future, and you have no idea what percentage of the entire network you'll own. Your purchasing power will continue to decrease in terms of dollars forever. Right now, we have all these assets like stocks, real estate, bonds, and gold competing for that store of value function that Bitcoin can potentially take over. But the issue with all these other assets is that governments have full control over them. For example, they can increase your taxes overnight and get you to pay way more than you do today. The current financial system requires middlemen to work. In today's financial system, we rely on banks, financial institutions, governments to approve our transactions and to let us even transact. You can't really sell a house for $500,000 of cash. Where are you going to get that cash in the first place? The person who has that cash will probably have to go to a bank to get it, and they're going to be questioned, and they're going to be asked where they're using this money, how they're using this money, why are they using this money, who's this money going to? And then when you get that money, what are you going to do with it? You're going to have to hold on to $500,000 of cash. How are you going to spend that much money? So the entire financial system right now is pretty much reliant on banks and financial institutions. And these banks and financial institutions have so much power over us. Because of that, they can freeze our accounts. They can take our assets away from us. You don't actually own the deed for your house. That's just the paper that shows that you're the owner. That deed is kept at a bank until you pay off your mortgage. So before you pay off your mortgage, you don't even actually own the house. And the entire system is designed this way. There are always going to be middlemen. Stocks, the same thing. You don't actually hold your stocks. Your stocks are held with a custodian. If this custodian goes bankrupt, you're probably going to be in trouble. Because of all these reasons, because of the fact that stocks and real estate are pretty much controlled by governments, I've stopped caring about cash flow and tax benefits, because I know for a fact that if something were to happen, and if my government or if my financial institution no longer wanted me to own this asset, they can take it away from me. The dividends that you're getting from owning a stock, or the rental income that you're getting from owning a house, it's all just fake money. It's money that can be created out of thin air. Those cash flows can disappear overnight if your government says that you can no longer own this property, or if they have a plan to maybe build a highway over wherever your house is, or if your stock account gets confiscated, you will no longer get your dividends. Nobody knows for a fact that the capital gains tax won't go up to 90%, or that they won't get charged an unrealized capital gains tax at some point in the future. If a government is about to go bankrupt, they can confiscate your assets. They can freeze your accounts. They can take everything from you so that they can survive. I think if the US government stops being able to borrow as much money as it wants to, the people who are investing in the US are going to be in really big trouble. Instead of being able to borrow money to spend on all the things that it wants to, the US government is now going to have to charge higher and higher taxes to pay for all of its expenses. On a Bitcoin standard, everyone is considered a peer, meaning that everyone is equivalent to everyone else. Nobody can change the rules of the network. Nobody can control it. Nobody can print money out of thin air. Nobody can create more rules that didn't exist already. Over time, we're going to see more and more benefits of using Bitcoin, which is neutral money, over currencies like the dollar or the euro or the pound, which are controlled by a central authority. On a Bitcoin standard, it doesn't matter what your age, race, location, gender are. None of that matters. All that matters is that you have your private keys to your wallet and you can spend that Bitcoin however you want to. Right now, I know a lot of people are scared of Bitcoin because it's so volatile. The price keeps moving up and down, but this is what's going to happen forever when you price something in a fiat currency that can be created at will. The difference between Bitcoin and these fiat currencies is that Bitcoin has a limited supply and almost nobody has it yet, meaning that more and more people are going to want to buy it over time. So the price will go up. But along the way, we're going to see the price come down temporarily because the supply of US dollars is going to temporarily decrease. For example, if the Federal Reserve increases interest rates, it becomes harder to borrow more money or to create more money out of thin air. What this means is that the amount of money entering the economy is decreasing, meaning that fewer dollars are chasing Bitcoin in that period. But over time, if you look at 4-year periods, you're going to see that Bitcoin's price is always going up because the US dollar, like I said, is a melting ice cube and the value will keep decreasing forever. Most people like the dollar because they see the stability. They see that in their bank account, they're going to have $100 or $1,000 forever if they don't spend it. They're just saving. They see that one value and they're okay with it, but they're more comfortable with it. They're okay with the sideways movement. But they don't realize that governments and central banks are intentionally making their purchasing power decrease by 2, 3, 5% every single year. So that $1,000 that you have in your bank account today will be worth $20 less next year, then $20 less the following year, then $20 less the following year. When people see Bitcoin's price in terms of dollars, of course it's going to fluctuate, so they're scared. They don't want to own it because they don't want to see their hard-earned wealth disappearing. This is just a bias. It's an emotional reaction. The price of Bitcoin will always fluctuate, but when you own Bitcoin, you own a certain percentage of the entire network, and nobody can change this. This is a completely different perspective to look at it from, and this is where the phrase 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin comes from. When you own 1 Bitcoin out of the 21 million that'll ever exist, nobody can take this away from you. Nobody can stop you from owning that wealth. 1 Bitcoin will always be equivalent to 1 Bitcoin. Nobody can replace Bitcoin with something else. The only way to really see the value of Bitcoin is to understand that it's neutral money and to not compare it with everything else on the market. When you compare something like real estate to Bitcoin, of course, you're going to see some benefits if you look at real estate from the US dollar perspective. You're going to get cash flows. You're going to be able to sell your real estate for more over the long term. You can always produce more houses. You can always produce more stocks, but you can't produce more Bitcoin. Once the 21 million Bitcoin is issued, there's no more. Over time, as Bitcoin is being taken out of the circulating supply, the price will continue to go up. More and more people are going to realize that this is neutral money and this is the best form of money that we can hold. As more people realize that using neutral money as a savings vehicle is the best way to go because nobody can steal your wealth from you, the price will go up even more. Over time, more and more people are willing to give away their dollars for Bitcoin, but at the same time, fewer and fewer people are willing to give away their Bitcoin for dollars. Anyone who has dollars is going to have to convince anyone who has Bitcoin to sell them their Bitcoin for dollars. And the amount of dollars required to convince someone to give you their Bitcoin is increasing every 4 years. As more and more people understand what Bitcoin is, as more and more people see the benefits of neutral money, of money that can't be controlled by governments, of money that's separated from banks and financial institutions. As more and more people see the benefits of using Bitcoin, the price is going to rise in terms of dollars because dollars are directly competing with Bitcoin. More dollars will be required over time to buy the same amount of Bitcoin. At a point, 1 Bitcoin is going to be worth tens of millions of dollars, and the all-time high that we saw a few months ago is going to be a rounding error. We're going to see $74,000 moves in weeks or days. Once you get over the volatility of Bitcoin, it becomes a lot easier to study it, to understand it, and to see the value that it actually offers. Watch the video on your screen right now to see how Bitcoin improves our food.